Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Scott Bush. I'm your host, and I'm here with Brian Flynn, Tibco's Director of Solution Architecture. Brian is ready to explain how artificial intelligence can have an impressive impact on financial crime investigation, but before he gets started, I'd like to bring your attention to the question panel on your right. If you look over there, there's an area you can put in your questions. We'll leave some time at the end for Brian to take them. Feel welcome to submit your questions that you might have. And we love questions. They make these things so much better, and there's always someone else that can benefit from your questions. So we encourage them, and please ask away. All right, let's dive right in. Brian, over to you.
Thanks, Scott. Welcome, everyone. So again, to Scott's point, we just wanted to walk through some of the interesting things that Tibco is providing, specifically around the financial services industry as it relates to our cognitive search and insight platform. So we'll go ahead and jump right in. So, for folks who are familiar with the Tibco, this may not be, a surprise to you, but certainly, we at Tibco, we are kind of search wonks. We love search, and we really truly believe our mission is to have search be at the core of every enterprise, regardless of its financial services, high-tech machinery, business-to-business sales operations and e-commerce. We really do support many different use cases, and again, specifically today, we're going to talk about how we help out with financial services. In terms of some of the folks we work with to date, you'll see kind of a list of the high-level customers and some of the lighthouse accounts that we work with. On the right-hand side, folks like HSBC, UBS, Deutsche Bank, Citibank, Bank of America, and among others as well. And that's based off of really our expertise in the field and our leadership as it's provided by Forrester and Gartner. We're recognized as the leader by Forrester for cognitive search and knowledge discovery solutions, as well as their big data text analytics platform. And then in Gartner, we're recognized as a leader for enterprise search there as well. Between our experience, between our market leadership and our IP, those are really key differentiators for us, and we'll talk specifically how those relate to financial services. And to date, we have about 10 patents, pretty much on the average of one new patent per year since the company and the software has been around for about 10 years at this point. Today, we're going to focus on, particularly the risk avoidance use cases, we call it, and solutions we provide there, as you'll see on the right-hand side. Capabilities around communication monitoring as it relates to financial services, anti-money laundering, as well as KYC applications. We have other use cases and solutions we provide as well. Some are more generic than these fairly specific risk avoidance financial services use cases we're going to describe today, but they focus primarily around a unified digital workplace and customer support. We've done webinars on these activities and these solutions in the past, so I encourage you to kind of check those out in the future, and then, if you have specific questions about those later on, don't hesitate to reach out directly to Tibco. So, one of the big things that we see in the market, certainly not just over the course of the last 6 months, but even going back, 5, even 10 years, cognitive search is extremely important as it relates to kind of protecting your brand and any applications that are associated with regulatory practices. And this is just a slide to kind of give you a quick overview of some of the fines that we've seen in the news, and I'm sure you all have seen making news headlines over the course of the last 3 months in terms of actual fines levied by fairly large institutions against banks. Going back to December 2017, just a couple months ago, there's a $26 million fine specifically levied to a bank for poor AML practices. And even later that month, there was then a $70 million fine assessed, a couple weeks later, different bank, but again, same governing agency. In January 2018, we saw another $29 million AML fine levied as well. And then even as recently as last month, and this one's making some pretty significant splashes, even for our existing customers, one of the banks, a major bank, was actually fined $600 million for essentially what was classified as shoddy AML practices. And one of the things that Tibco provides in terms of the solutions we offer is a way to try to solve some of those problems that we know our customers are facing. And it's based on a number of different aspects, a number of different ways they need to ultimately protect their brand. To Scott's point earlier, we do have a poll question that's provided as part of this webinar experience, and just wanted to get a sense of some of the financial crimes challenges that we think that are in the pretty much in the marketplace today, but what are you actually seeing? How are you kind of anticipating some of these challenges that you're running with, and how can Tibco help? So feel free to take some time to answer that, and we'll review the results momentarily. All right, so the poll results are in. This looks about right. I'm glad to see some of the folks have recognized what we're anticipating here. You know, the top two choices that we saw have been selected. Managing access to a myriad of data sources, and we'll certainly touch on how Tibco can help there in terms of, you know, connecting and correlating communication information in terms of how people are talking about particular trades or how people are talking about particular activities. And then even the effective analysis of massive data volumes, where you're talking about not just millions of communications, millions of trade executions, millions of activities within financial services, but you know, for a lot of the customers that we work in the financial services, it's really kind of into the billions with a B. So we'll certainly touch on both of those aspects. Great. And Scott, can we see my screen okay? Just want to make sure we're ready to keep moving here.
Yeah, looks good.
Awesome. So how does Tibco fit into this whole conversation? So there's really three main you know, offerings within risk avoidance for financial services, which we're going to touch on today. First and foremost, comprehensive crime analysis. So this notion of confidently protecting your brand and reputation by analyzing every source of risk. And this is a use case that we're seeing come up quite often in the financial services industry among many of our existing customers, where they have an idea of their customers, they have an idea of the accounts associated with those customers, as well as the transactions. And what they're actually tasked of doing is understanding and analyzing, are there any types of patterns or potentially financial crimes which are occurring just based on the folks that are banked by a particular financial services institute. So we'll touch on that. Our ability to enable extreme accuracy, specifically as it relates to investigation practices for reducing the amount of manual data analysis that's required. And that kind of speaks to some of the poll responses that it seems like people are resonating with in terms of you know, correlating various data sources, not just the volumes of those data sources, but the different types of data sources, and trying to gain meaning from them. And we'll certainly touch on one of the solutions that speaks to that as well. And then the last piece here is around, you know, truly transforming productivity and actually automating and correlating some of the activities that some of our customers are having to perform when they're actually trying to determine, is this a case or is this a particular issue that we need to escalate, or is this actually truly a false positive? So correlating this information and presenting it in such a way that's going to be intuitive for financial crime analysts is going to be pretty critical for some of these applications that we'll walk through in a moment. And before we jump into those specific solution capabilities, you know, how do we do it? What do we do? And what does the technology actually provide? And I could probably, and for folks that have maybe spent some time with some of the other webinars, we do spend some time talking about each of these various critical requirements that relate to cognitive search. Today, we're not going to really focus on any one in particular, but just understand that, you know, whether you do have big data requirements around indexing billions of records, whether you have the requirements for, you know, truly providing a question and answer system where you can have the platform, have your search experience understand and interpret the intent of your query, or any of the different features and functionality here. These are all important and kind of wrap into some of the solutions we're going to talk about that are powered by Tibco around these three particular use cases. So just things to keep in mind. And again, if there's additional questions about these after the webinar, don't hesitate to reach out or review some of the other webinars we provided in the past. So kind of first things first, you know, we touched on this previously, this notion of ad hoc financial crimes investigation. And, you know, really the solution we're trying to provide here is to answer this fairly simple question. How can I effectively search against and analyze all of my customers, all of my accounts, and all of my transactions? And again, in that type of environment, you're not necessarily talking about, you know, just millions and millions of records, but you're pretty much getting right into the billions of records of different transaction types, whether those are wire transfers, ATM withdrawals, peer-to-peer transfers, check postings, things of that nature, and how they associate and correlate with various accounts and customers. So with Tibco, what we're providing to our customers that are specifically interested in these types of use cases is a single search box, a single interface that allows them to search against, in an ad hoc manner, all of their different customer records, all of their accounts, and any money patterns that have been occurring in terms of money flowing in and out of these various accounts, so that people can essentially perform their own analysis without having to have a deep understanding of SQL. It's a very straightforward use case as it sounds, but as you can imagine, the data volumes can become fairly complex fairly quickly, and how you correlate that information together in a way that can be effective for analysis is going to be pretty critical. I don't have a full demonstration to show today. I just have a screenshot of an example UI that can be provided and really kind of brings home the point of what we're trying to provide here. But to kind of get into more specifics around what are the types of things we're doing as it relates to financial crime investigation, certainly, again, the ability to search against multiple data streams. Again, those customers, those accounts, those transactions, they all exist with many of our customers in some format, in some regard. But in terms of getting the search experience at the fingertips of your end users or your analysts, that's typically a fairly difficult problem. But with search, with Tibco specifically, we not only enable them to search against those customers, those accounts, those transactions, we can even correlate them to other KYC documents or even SAR narratives as well. So whether you're looking for a particular entity, whether you're looking for a particular person or a company by name, or maybe you're looking for, a detective that was actually recorded as writing or participating as part of the SAR that was written up for that particular customer. With Tibco, you can search for any of those keywords, those key phrases, and based on our relevancy scoring algorithms using machine learning, we can provide you with the most relevant customers, the most relevant entities that are related to your particular query, and give you an exact understanding of why, and then even a better understanding from a 360 view in terms of, okay, why is this customer important to my query, and then maybe how are they actually moving money in and out of their accounts? Are they transacting with high-risk countries, as an example, and things like that. Beyond financial crime analysis, we also have a capability for supporting anti-money laundering investigation, and an application that's been provided for a couple of our customers to date. And again, the whole idea behind this is improving investigator productivity, where they want to understand what parties should be involved, or should I know about, that are involved with this particular transaction. So with this type of use case, we're really focusing on ensuring that the investigators, they don't have to go to several different data sources that are several different applications and correlate and cobble together the types of information, the specific facts that are going to be important to determine whether or not this needs to be something that's escalated. In a world with Tibco, we're actually indexing and connecting to those various data sources, whether, again, they're structured pieces of information, customer facts, various kind of adverse media information that might be available in unstructured data sources as well, pulling them all together and providing a platform that generates an end user application and the business logic to support how should we determine whether this particular case should be escalated as an additional narrative into the next regulatory stage, or if this needs to be kind of moved off and considered as a false positive, so to speak. So, and with Tibco, the real goal here is at scale, indexing and ingesting all of those different data sources, all those different facts, and all those different pieces of information that are important for that investigator to have access to, and provide them with a single screen application where they can view all that information. And then the last piece we're going to focus on today, which we'll have a demonstration of, is this notion of e-communication surveillance. And specifically, again, the challenge here that we're trying to help solve is, what are traders on my floor potentially saying or doing that might be violating bank policies, whether those are specific to our bank or whether those are executed or kind of enforced by various regulatory bodies and agencies. And again, in a world without Tibco, we have a lot of customers that are struggling to comply with some of those regulations that may occur within any jurisdiction that they might be servicing in, whether that's US, EU, or elsewhere. But with Tibco, what we're able to do is not only allow them to comply with some of those regulations, but we're doing it in such a way that we're indexing all of the communication that might be occurring within that particular financial services bank. Whether, again, that's chat communications that might be happening over Skype, whether those are phone conversations that have to be transcribed and then analyzed, and even email communications which might be occurring. All of those different communication channels which at some level regulatory bodies are expecting are being monitored today or will be in the near future, With Tibco, you can index, again, very large scale volumes of information so that when folks are actually trying to determine, should we actually be flagging or working through all of these false positives that are being generated whenever this particular key phrase is being mentioned, with Tibco, you can actually get much more robust with that. You have much more granular business logic control to understand how should we interpret these particular flagrant actions based off of all of the information that we have access to and we're indexing as part of the platform. So we're going to move into a quick demonstration of, again, specifically e-communication surveillance. This is just a simple user interface that we've provided to an index we have stored locally. As you'll see here, the index we have is actually public-facing information. It's essentially the Enron data that's been publicly available for quite some time now that we have indexed, we've integrated as part of the platform, and we're providing this end-user experience on top of it to provide some of the capabilities that we see are extremely important as it relates to e-communication surveillance. So first things first, again, we have a whole host of different kind of emails, instant message conversations which are occurring. And what we're trying to provide here is essentially a quick way and an overview for an analyst to determine what is the risk of this particular conversation. In this example here, we're working with specifically email communications. What are some of the conversations that are occurring which should be flagged as a particular type of violation? Whether that's, as you see in this example here, we see a couple of violations that are occurring. They have a specific risk score associated with those particular violations. And the nice thing about the platform is we're not just building violations based off of an explicit mention of a particular key phrase or a keyword. We're able to provide the business logic in the back end to say if these types of entities, these people, these locations, these companies are being mentioned in close proximity to each other with some of these high-risk transactions or inflammatory terms might be associated with them, that's as complex as the business logic you can provide and actually submit against every single communication which occurs through and processes by the Tibco platform. And you can see on the left-hand side, for every single communication that's being analyzed, we can start to extract additional entity information about it. Some of the more generic things that you would expect: who is this communication coming from? Who is it going to? Who are the participants, whether those are CCs, BCCs, included as group chats, what have you? What are the total risk scores associated with these particular email communications and threads? And then even specifically some of the more advanced capabilities around what are those violations that are occurring? What is the overall sentiment of some of these conversations? How does that feed into some of the violations? And even some of the language detection capabilities around, are they speaking just in English or are there non-English languages that are being discussed? And how do we take that into consideration as part of the analysis here? All of this information is certainly interactive as well. So if I wanted to say, show me all communications that are being flagged as bidder violations, and then I wanted to even further say where they're also mentioning something along the lines of free Astros tickets, a key phrase that has been automatically identified by the Tibco platform. Again, from those couple of clicks, without even doing any ad hoc queries, we're going from a couple hundred email threads and communications down to just 7 here. And things become even more interesting when you start to think about, with a Tibco, you can actually correlate some of these communications back with each other. So you're not just looking at individual emails that are occurring, but you're actually able to look at the corpus of all of the communications that occur within a particular thread, and then what are the cumulative scores that occur across every single email that's actually being indexed and processed by the platform. So we see several violations of bidder violations are occurring across every single thread, which is totaling up to a total thread risk score of 1,750. So again, with the platform, we're trying to make it easier for those investigators to quickly analyze and not have to do a lot of manual effort around all of the analysis that they have to look through every single communication. With a Tibco, we're indexing the corpus of all those communications, running that business logic through every single piece of information we're processing, and providing this end user experience that makes this much more intuitive and much quicker for analysis. If I switch over to the enforcement dashboard, just to give a different view into the same type of information, we can provide a much more visualized overview of all the different communications which are occurring. So whether it's communications between two particular parties based off of their email address, we can see that it looks like these two particular folks are having at least a couple communications with one another, or we can see how individuals are actually communicating within groups with one another, just trying to show some threat analysis and communication network analysis of all of the different communications we have insight into, and how that can quickly enable analysts to understand, is this particular thread that I'm pulling at related to individual users or a group of users. So again, you can actually re-visualize and re-render this entire screen based off of whatever query, whatever key phrases, and whatever piece of information you're looking at this particular point in time. Show me the enforcement dashboard just for mentions of this particular bidder violation. And then if you wanted to drill down on a specific person of interest, maybe I wanted to specifically drill down on Jeff as an example here, you could use that facet, click on Jeff Desovich, and drill down specifically on only those communications which have occurred with this particular person as well. And if you want to get even more granular on this particular communication with Jeff, you can start to understand, just by clicking on the edge between a person or two individuals here, you can get a quick overview of all of the different interactions, communications that have occurred between that edge you've clicked on. Or in this edge that I clicked on here, it's the communications that occur between Cindy and Jeff in this particular instance. Who are the other participants that are occurring? What are the particular things that they continue to talk about? Are there any violations that are occurring across these communications between the two of them? And then specifically, what are those communications and how can I investigate those even further? So again, understand that with Tibco, you're indexing this content at scale, you're performing all of this enrichment using machine learning capabilities and some business logic applied to these as well, and you're really trying to enable your end users, your analysts, to quickly perform their job against the corpus of every single communication that's occurring today and in the future. And one final piece within this demonstration, the nice thing about the platform of Tibco is that, certainly some of the visualizations we're showing, those are things that we can provide as an end user experience, but we also have the ability to integrate our platform into traditional BI tools, whether those are Tableau, whether those are Spotfire, whether those are ClickView. You can essentially have those BI tools treat our search index as if we were a database using our ODBC and JDBC drivers, so that if you wanted to take advantage of some of the the things that BI tools are generally good at in terms of visualizing, getting a clear understanding of the different types of patterns which are occurring, whether that's k-means or cluster distribution, what have you, those are all types of things that are available and out of the box with the integration that Tibco provides. And just the last piece here in terms of, again, visualizing some of these communications, again, using that Tableau dashboard or whatever BI tool of interest there, whether you want to provide a k-means clustering, whether you want to provide any other types of visualizations, or even using the Tableau dashboard for understanding the thread of communications, the timelines by which they occurred. Again, whether you're using our platform and our UI capabilities out of the box, or whether you want to integrate with your own visualization tools, it's entirely up to you and in really what your business requirements are. So we've got about 5 minutes left for the demonstration here. I'm going to pause there for a moment. I know we want to leave some time for questions and answers, so we can go ahead and do that at this point in time.
Great, thanks, Brian. There's one question that came through during the presentation. If you could explain the definition of a false positive and maybe give an example of that.
Sure. Yeah, so a false positive, and the notion is, in a world without a Tibco, we have a lot of customers that we're talking to or that are implementing the solution already, where prior to their experience with the Tibco, they have fairly rudimentary business logic and capabilities for flagging, whether it's communications, whether it's flagging particular issues that are being escalated as potential anti-money laundering issues. They're flagging these particular issues that once a human gets a chance to review and interpret and understand why is this being flagged in the first case, if something is being flagged incorrectly by some automated process prior to the human intervention, and that human looks at it and says, oh, this shouldn't actually be flagged because of XYZ, that is considered a false positive. So, and again, in a world with a Tibco, you're having some of these kind of dumb machines that are looking at these particular communications, these particular patterns of money movements, and saying, okay, based on these rudimentary business logic, I think that this is something that needs to be investigated. In a world with a Tibco, you have much more capability in terms of providing whatever business logic, whatever machine learning techniques you require for ultimately providing better escalation procedures in terms of, is this a particular false positive that I need to be aware of, or is this something that is actually an issue I need to be escalating to the next stage? So with Tibco, you're really trying to reduce the number of false positives that are occurring in the first place that are getting escalated into whatever that next regulatory stage you might have internally.
Great. Yeah, just a reminder, there's a Q&A panel to your right. If you have a question, we'll take a few more minutes here. I've got one other, Brian. Someone's asking about considerations around technical or hardware needs that would support a large-scale index.
Sure.
Do they need to consider anything there?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point. It's somewhat more of a technical concept, something that, again, we could have a whole hour conversation specifically on the deployment methodologies of the Tibco platform. With Tibco, our platform does scale, as we call it, and as it's traditionally known, it's scaling horizontally and vertically. So that essentially means we support high availability and fault tolerance to ensure, high profile, high access, and critical applications will always be functioning to whatever type of frequency you require. We can scale our platform to support, a couple, 10 users and 100,000 documents up to hundreds of thousands of users and millions and billions of documents. And that's all based off the platform capability. So there's no hard and fast rule in terms of what is the amount of hardware that's required for your particular solution, because everyone's a little bit different in terms of what they're looking for, what data sources they're connecting to, how much content they're indexing. But rest assured, the platform actually provides the ability to scale across the number of users you're expecting, how many queries they're going to be submitting, how large the index is going to be, and what type of content you're expecting to process and what frequency you're doing so. So with Tibco, you have the ability to kind of flex the platform deployment to whatever your solution requirements are, and our team within the solution architecture team, we're happy to work through with anyone to understand what are some of those considerations technically, and how should we be considering approaching this problem moving forward.
All right, another one here, Brian. How is Tibco able to correlate structured and unstructured data sources? For example, customer records to SAR narratives.
Yeah, sure. No, I kind of actually touched on that exactly a little earlier today. And we're talking about this notion of indexing multiple different data sources, structured and unstructured data types, and the ones I see traditionally in financial services. They can be, again, customers, they can be accounts, they can be SAR narratives that are already being written elsewhere within your financial services institute. And with Tibco, we have this capability. It's actually patented technology for our platform that's called query time join, where you don't, as you would with a traditional database, where you have to think a lot about the data modeling aspect of how should this table, this particular concept, or this customer record be associated directly to this particular account. With Tibco, you can actually define how those relationships should be represented within the application at query time. So in that example, you can actually determine and tell the platform, okay, I want to understand all customers that are have SAR narratives that have been written about them, where the SAR narrative is mentioning this particular entity or this particular company or this particular location or this address or what have you. So the narrative that's unstructured and the customer record, which is structured, effectively gets joined together at query time, where the only results you get back are those customers that are associated with the query you searched against that particular SAR narrative within. And that's one example of many different types of options that are available for financial services institutes in terms of how they query those types of results.
Great. Thanks, Brian. That was a quick half hour. We're going to wrap up now for the sake of time for everybody. I want to thank you all for attending. Thank you, Brian, for the presentation, and hope everybody has a great rest of their day. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.